Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into something I think a lot of people have heard, right? Especially if you're even remotely interested in the whole startup world. You know that classic advice, follow your passion.
Yeah, definitely. It's everywhere. It's practically become like a startup mantra, hasn't it?
It really has. I mean, it sounds good on the surface, right? That whole idea of your inner fire fueling this big idea you have, turning it into something real. But
Right, but is it really enough? I mean, what if all that passion, all by itself, ends up being more like, well, like a flickering candle instead of like a real, powerful engine?
right, it's like, yeah, you get this little spark, but does it actually have what it takes to keep things going long term? That's what we're going to unpack today. And we've got some seriously interesting material to dig into.
We do. We're going way beyond just that surface level, rah-rah kind of motivation and looking at what actually makes the difference, what really takes a startup from a cool idea to, a real lasting business.
Think of this as your crash course in what really matters. The elements that separate the ventures that take off from the ones that, well, quickly fizzle out.
Exactly.
Okay, so first things first, right? Why can being so intensely passionate about your idea actually be a trap?
Well, one of the biggest things that jumps out is this idea of blind optimism. You get so wrapped up in your idea that you might not see the market clearly.
Oh, yeah, you're just so convinced it's amazing.
Right. And it makes it so hard to step back and ask, okay, are people really waiting for this? Is there even a need for it? Or how tough is the competition out there?
So your passion is almost working against you.
It can. Absolutely. It can act like these blinders, blocking out anything that doesn't fit the picture you have in your head. And that can lead to what's called overconfidence bias, which is basically
Way too sure of yourself.
exactly. You're so sure of your vision that you might not even look for feedback or, even worse, you hear it and you just brush it off.
Because it doesn't fit with what you want to believe.
Right. And that outside perspective, that critical eye is so important because here's the thing, all that internal belief, all that fire in your belly, it can't make customers appear out of thin air.
It's true. And even if the market is there, having all this passion doesn't magically give you the skills to actually run a business.
That is a really key point.
I mean, you can dream up this amazing company in your head, but if you don't know how to handle the day-to-day stuff, managing people, money, actually making things
Just
happen,
seeing it all going.
yeah, your dream's going to stay just that, a dream.
It's a bit like being super passionate about, I don't know, sailing around the world, but you never actually learn how to, read a map or even tie a knot.
You're going to be in trouble.
Big trouble. And to really illustrate this, I think it's helpful to look at a real-world example, something that had a ton of passion behind it, but still ultimately didn't work out.
You're talking about Juicero, right?
Right. Yeah, Juicero. Now, they managed to raise something like $120 million. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Hmm.
And the founder, he was clearly passionate about, healthy living, fresh juice, all of that. They came up with this incredibly sleek, high-tech juicing machine.
Yeah, oh, I remember this. It was all over the place. It felt so futuristic, those fancy machines, the juice packs.
Right, like the future of juicing had arrived.
Totally.
But in the end, Juicero failed. And the core problem was, despite all that passion and innovation, the product didn't solve a real problem for people. Like, you could literally just squeeze the juice packs yourself and get the same result.
Hmm.
The fancy machine wasn't actually necessary.
It's like they over-engineered a solution to a problem that didn't really need solving.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. So all that passion couldn't make up for the fact that at the end of the day, they weren't offering something people truly valued.
So, if passion on its own can lead you astray, what are the things that actually matter? What keeps a startup moving in the right direction?
So based on all the research and case studies we've looked at, there are a few key areas that consistently come up. And the first one, which is really the foundation of everything else, is market validation.
Okay, so what exactly does that mean?
Simply put, it's about proving that there's a real need for your product or service before you go all in.
So don't just assume people will want it.
Right, you have to go out and talk to your potential customers, do actual market research, really test your core assumptions, and it's even better if you can test an early version of your product, like a bare bones version, just to see if people actually use it and, like it.
That makes sense. It's like, okay, your idea might sound awesome in your head, but does it actually solve a problem for people out in the real world?
Exactly.
And speaking of solving problems, one of the sources actually uses Airbnb as an example of this.
Oh yeah, Airbnb, it's a classic startup story.
It is. So, reminder for anyone who doesn't know, Airbnb is basically a platform where people can rent out their homes or rooms to travelers.
Right. But it didn't start out with, global domination in mind. It was much more humble beginnings.
So tell me about those beginnings.
Well, it all started because the founders needed some extra cash. There was this big design conference happening in San Francisco, and all the hotels were booked solid. So they came up with this idea to rent out air mattresses on their floor.
Your mattresses, that's it.
That's it. They noticed that travelers were having a tough time finding a place to stay, something affordable.
Hmm.
And they were like, hey, we have some space. We have air mattresses. Why not?
So simple.
But it worked. And they didn't just stop there. They really listened to what people were saying, what they liked, what they didn't like, and they kept tweaking things, improving the experience. And look at them now. They're this huge global platform.
It just goes to show that sometimes the biggest ideas start with a really simple solution to a real problem.
It really does.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in this whole idea of testing your assumptions and iterating, constantly proving based on feedback, there's a book that really dives into that, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Oh, yeah, that's become like a startup Bible almost.
It really has. It's
What?
all about how to build something quickly, get it out there, see how people react, and then learn and adapt. It's all about minimizing risk, which, let's face it, is a big part of any startup journey.
For sure. So you've validated your market. You know people actually want what you're offering. What's the next make or break piece?
Strong business model.
Okay, so we're not just talking about having a cool product or service here.
No, it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's about having a plan for how you're actually going to make money, how you'll keep the lights on.
So things like, how will you actually generate revenue? How will you price your product? And can you keep your costs under control?
Exactly. You can have the most amazing product in the world, something everyone wants, but if you don't figure out the money side of things,
It's not going to last.
it won't. And one of the sources actually highlights Dropbox as a company that really nailed this aspect.
Oh, Dropbox, the cloud storage guys. Tell me more about that.
So back when they were starting out, not everyone was convinced about this whole cloud storage thing.
Like, why would people trust their files to some, random company online?
Exactly. But Dropbox, they were smart about it. They offered people a decent amount of storage for free, and they made the whole experience super easy.
Simple to use, simple to understand.
Right. So people were like, okay, why not? It's free. It's easy. Let's try it. And that's how they got tons of users. And then, as people needed more storage, Dropbox started offering paid plans.
So it was kind of like a try before you buy thing.
Exactly. So what's called a freemium model. And it was a huge part of how they became so successful.
Smart. And for anyone who wants to learn more about the nuts and bolts of designing a solid business model, there's a book that's considered a classic.
Oh, yeah. Business Model Generation by
Mhm.
Alexander Osterwalder and Yves Pignier. You've seen that one?
I have. It's great. But it even has this cool tool called the Business Model Canvas.
Yeah, it's really helpful. It's like a visual template that helps you map out all the key parts of your business model. It's super useful for, getting everything clear in your head and making sure you've thought of everything.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got market validation, we've got a strong business model. What's something else that often gets overlooked in all the excitement of starting something new?
Execution.
Like actually doing the work, not just dreaming about it.
Exactly. It's one thing to have a brilliant idea, but it's a whole other thing to actually make it happen. And that's what execution's all about.
It's the difference between like having a recipe for an amazing cake and actually being able to bake it perfectly every time.
Perfect analogy. And there's a really interesting example of this in the sources, the story of Slack.
Oh, Slack, the messaging platform. Tell me about it.
So Slack actually started out as this internal tool for a gaming company. And that gaming company, well, it didn't really take off.
So the original idea, their passion project, didn't work out.
It didn't. But the team realized that the way they were communicating internally using this tool they had built was incredibly efficient.
So it was a side project that turned out to be gold.
In a way, yeah, they were like, hey, this communication thing, this is actually really good. Maybe other companies would find it useful too. So they made this big pivot and they focused all their energy on making this communication tool even better, making it really easy to use and integrate with other tools. And that's how Slack was born.
Interesting. So they took something from a project that didn't succeed and turned it into this hugely successful platform. And it sounds like their focus on making it user-friendly was key.
Absolutely. They were relentless about it. And it paid off, especially as more and more companies started working remotely.
Makes sense. So if anyone's looking to improve their, get stuff done skills, there's a book you might like. Execution, the discipline of getting things done.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. It's all about how to actually bridge the gap between having a plan and making it a reality. It talks about things like clear roles, making sure everyone knows what they're responsible for, and, just plain following through.
No matter how great your plan is, if you don't execute it well.
It's not going anywhere.
Okay, so let's say you've got a validated market, a strong business model, and you're executing like a champ. But even then, the startup journey is rarely smooth sailing, is it?
Definitely not. You have to remember, markets change, what people want changes, and there are always unexpected bumps in the road. That's why being able to adapt is so important.
So being flexible, being willing to adjust your course, even if it means moving away from your original vision.
Exactly. And one of the best examples of this is Instagram.
Oh, Instagram, everyone knows Instagram.
Everyone does now. But it didn't start out as the photo sharing app we know today. It actually started as this thing called Bourbon.
Burberry, what's that?
It was this location-based social networking app. Kind of like, check in where you are, see what your friends are doing. But it had way too many features. It was trying to do too much.
Too complicated.
Yeah. And the founders, they were paying attention to how people were actually using the app.
Mm-hmm.
And they noticed that people were mostly using it to share photos.
So they were like, okay, let's ditch all the other stuff and just focus on the photos.
Exactly. It was a risky move, but it was the right one.
Yeah.
And that's what led to Instagram's massive growth and ultimately them getting acquired by Facebook.
So sometimes you have to be willing to let go of your original idea, even if you're passionate about it, if it means going in a direction that's actually working.
Absolutely. And there's a book that talks about this idea of, not just surviving change, but actually thriving in it. It's called Anti-Fragile.
Yeah.
Things that gain from disorder by Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
It's an interesting concept. So instead of just being tough and weathering the storm, you actually become stronger because of the challenges you face.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
And it's really relevant to startups because, let's face it, the startup world is all about uncertainty and constant change.
For sure. Okay, so we've talked about validating your market, having a strong business model, executing well, and being adaptable. But even with all of that, no founder can do it all alone, right?
Nope, not at all. Building a great team is absolutely essential.
You need people around you who have different skills, who share your vision, and who can actually work together effectively.
It's about recognizing that you can't be good at everything.
Yeah.
And it's about bringing in people who can fill those gaps, who can challenge you, and who can help you take your vision to the next level.
It's like you might be a brilliant chef, but you still need a sous chef, a line cook, someone to wash the dishes.
Right. You need the whole team to make it work. And one of the sources actually quotes Steve Jobs on this. He said, "Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people."
Wise words. And the story of Apple is a perfect example of this. Steve Jobs was the visionary, the big ideas guy. But it was Tim Cook who brought this incredible operational expertise, making sure things actually got done efficiently.
Yeah, his background was in supply chain management. He was a master of execution. And together, they made Apple what it is today.
The dynamic duo.
Hey.
And for anyone who's really looking to dive deep into the whole teamwork thing, there's a book I always recommend, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Oh, yeah, that one's a classic. It talks about the common things that can go wrong in teams, lack of trust, people not being honest with each other, all that. And it gives you practical ways to address those issues and build a team that really works well together.
So important. Okay, last but not least, something that might seem obvious, but trips up a lot of startups. You got to be smart with your money.
Financial discipline, absolutely.
Yeah. Cash flow problems are one of the biggest reasons why startups fail. You have to manage your money carefully, get funding strategically, and focus on actually making a profit, not just chasing, vanity metrics.
It's about being responsible with the resources you have.
Yeah.
And understanding that you have to bring in more money than you spend if you want to build something sustainable.
Right. Otherwise, you're just running on fumes. And Tesla is a really interesting example of this.
Oh, how so?
Well, they were actually on the verge of bankruptcy back in 2008. They were burning through cash. Things were looking pretty bleak. But then Elon Musk made this big investment, and they managed to turn things around.
It was a close call.
It was. And today, Tesla is leading the charge in electric vehicles, and they're doing it because they've combined their innovative spirit with financial discipline.
Yeah, they're not just dreaming big, they're also figuring out how to make it work financially. And if you want a really unique perspective on managing money in a business, there's this book called Profit First.
I've heard good things about that one.
It's a bit unconventional, but the core idea is that you should prioritize profit from the very beginning.
So instead of profit being what's left over after you pay all your expenses.
You actually allocate a portion of your revenue to profit first. It's a way of building a strong financial foundation from day one.
Interesting approach. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think the big takeaway is this. Passion is a great starting point, but it's not enough on its own.
You need that dose of pragmatism, that practical mindset, to really make it work.
You have to be able to see your idea clearly, to be open to feedback, to adapt when things aren't working, and you have to surround yourself with the right people and manage your money wisely.
It's about asking yourself those tough questions. Does my idea really solve a problem? Am I truly open to hearing what people think, even if it's not what I want to hear? Do I have the right team? Do I have the resources to make this happen?
Honesty is key.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the sources actually use Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, as a great example of someone who balanced passion with a practical, down-to-earth approach.
Oh yeah, Spanx. I mean, who hasn't heard of Spanx?
Right. So she had this passion for fashion and for, solving a problem she had personally experienced. But she didn't just jump in blindly. She did her research, she talked to people, she figured out how to make it work from a business perspective.
So she was hands-on, she was persistent.
And she was constantly learning and adapting. That combination of passion and a really grounded approach is what made Spanx so successful.
So to sum it all up, passion is that spark, but it's market validation that tells you if your idea has legs. It's a strong business model that lays out how you'll actually make money. It's execution that turns your ideas into action. It's adaptability that helps you navigate the ups and downs. It's a strong team that supports you and helps you grow. And it's financial discipline that keeps you on track and ensures you can keep going.
And when you put all of those things together, that's when you have the recipe for building something truly special, something that can actually make a difference.
And on that note, I love this quote from Reid Hoffman. An entrepreneur is someone who jumps off a cliff and builds a plane on the way down. It perfectly captures that mix of passion, that willingness to take a leap, but also that practical problem-solving mindset you need to actually succeed.
It does, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, you take that jump, but then you got to figure out how to build your wings and fly.
Exactly. And if you want to explore this idea of challenging conventional thinking and really pushing boundaries, one of the sources recommends a book called Zero to One by Peter Thiel.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. It's all about creating something truly new, something that's never been done before, rather than just, copying what everyone else is doing.
So whether you're just starting out with that burning passion for an idea or you're already on your journey and looking for ways to take things to the next level, always remember that combining your passion with a smart, practical approach is the best way to make your vision a reality.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
It's been a pleasure.